Welcome to Fireside Gaming. I'm Billum, and this time around we're covering Risk of Rain 2. This is a third-person shooter that puts players in the role of a group of explorers responding to a distress beacon from an uncharted planet. At least that's the basic setting of the game. There is not a straightforward story that's simply told to the player. Instead, Risk of Rain 2 keeps most of its backstory and lore contained to item descriptions and logbooks. If you're the kind of player that likes spending hours reading through this type of stuff, then this game has you covered. Personally, I don't mind this type of storytelling at times. I mean, I love From Software games, and that's what they're known for. However, in the case of Risk of Rain 2, I couldn't really care less. Instead, my major focus is on the gameplay. When starting up a game of Risk of Rain 2, players are given a couple of characters to choose from. These characters each have their own unique playstyles. As players beat the game and complete secret tasks, even more characters are unlocked. The base game features 11 characters for players to make runs with. Each of these characters also have additional abilities that can be unlocked by completing certain objectives while playing. And while I said this is a third-person shooter, it also has some melee classes as well. One of the first you unlock is called the Mercenary. Just one look at this fast-paced samurai and you've got a good idea of how this character plays. The other, and my personal favorite, is the Loader. This is a beefed-up woman in an exosuit that uses rocket fists to pummel her enemies and swing around levels like Spider-Man. And of course, the various shooters in the game bring different styles with them. There's the dual-wielding commando, auto-targeting huntress, long-range bandit, and more. As I said, the game offers plenty of variety, and each player is likely to find at least one or two characters they enjoy playing as. There's also additional characters that players can get from purchasing DLC for the game. I don't have the DLC yet since I've already got enough entertainment from the characters I have, but the option is there for players seeking a little more. Risk of Rain 2 also has players recovering lost cargo that's fallen across the mysterious planet they've been called to. In doing this, players will have to combat the various types of creatures that inhabit this world. Doing so earns them money, which can be used to open chests, activate altars, and for other purposes. All of these actions grant players new items or buffs they can use to make their journey easier. There's also lunar tokens that players can earn. These open up paths to new areas as well as unlock incredibly powerful items that typically come with some harsh drawbacks. Picking up all of these different items lets players add a level of customization to their characters, but the items they get are mostly random, meaning they won't have fine control over the final build. To help with that, there are some dispensers that let players see what they're spending money on. The game also features scrappers that sometimes show up in levels. These let players choose items to sacrifice for scrap that matches its rarity. Players can then take these to trading terminals, which will take their scrap in exchange for the item they show. One of the biggest draws of Risk of Rain 2 is the multiplayer. This lets up to 4 players tackle the game together as they try to make their way to the end of a run. The game can also be played solo, and it's still enjoyable, but I can't say I've done many solo runs in my time with the game, which is sitting at over 40 hours. I call them runs as the game moves through a few levels before giving the player the option to fight the final boss. Players that don't want to can instead choose to start a second run with the same characters. This has them again completing the same amount of levels before being given the option of fighting the final boss one more time, or they can just choose to obliterate themselves and end the game there. It usually takes anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half to complete a run through Risk of Rain 2. Because of that, I often don't stack multiple runs at once. It's just too much of a time sink for me. Also, the ever-increasing difficulty of enemies as time passes means players might end up dead before getting a second or third chance at challenging the final boss. Another thing players will want to note are the roguelike elements of Risk of Rain 2. If players die during a solo run, they lose all of their progress and have to start over. In multiplayer, they'll have to wait for their allies to make it to the next level before they can spawn back in. And while there are only a certain number of levels in Risk of Rain 2, they can change up a little bit from time to time. That includes some paths being open in one run and not in another. These minor changes add a little variety to the game as it keeps levels feeling fresh longer than they would otherwise. There are also some levels that have a lower chance of showing up. It's always fun running across one of these as it's akin to finding a secret, even if the player didn't do anything in particular to make them appear. As far as the visuals go, Risk of Rain 2 is a good-looking game. Each of the characters have their own flair to them, and the game's levels all stand out well from each other. This combines well with the overall art style to give the game its own look without requiring a powerful PC to play. I'll also quickly mention that the game is available on all major consoles, but I can't attest as to how well it runs on them as I'm only familiar with the PC version. To go along with those solid visuals, Risk of Rain 2 has a solid soundtrack, with each area in the game sporting their own unique themes. I've got some personal favorites that I always enjoy hearing while running through the game, and none of the songs are bad in my opinion. Overall, Risk of Rain 2 is a good game to kill some time with. It offers plenty for players to do with its various unlockables, and is great to play with a group of friends. Those going in solo are also likely to enjoy their time with the game as well, depending on their preference. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm still new to covering indie games, so I completely welcome any constructive criticisms you might have. Also, if you like retro games, that's my main forte, and I've got a wealth of those reviews you can dive into as well. And as always, take it easy.